Okay, welcome back to exercise 5. And the image we're going to be working with right now is this file, Harconi Gardens as a Smart Object. To review a little bit, while you're in Bridge and you have a photograph chosen, you can look at the metadata and it will give you the f-stop, the shutter speed, the ISO, pixel dimension, and the megabytes, along with color space, when it was taken, when it was modified, and you can add a bunch of additional information. So this is a raw file, yeah? How do I know it's a raw file? The extension. Yeah, the extension is CR2. This is a JPEG, but it has this little icon, and what's that icon mean? Yeah, I have been edited in Camera Raw. A raw file, remember, is not really a format so much as all of the camera's information that was recorded on the sensor. And in order to use a Camera Raw file, it needs to be edited and converted, right? So that's what we use the program Camera Raw for. So in this example, I did that and I opened it in Photoshop as a smart object. So let's back up a little and start at the beginning with that. So if I take this panorama, it's part of a panorama that we're going to put together. If I take this CR2 raw image and I double click on it, it will open up Photoshop and take us right into Camera Raw editing. Cool. Let's bring this back over here. All right, so I can go through and set up just some basic adjustments with white balance. That looks a little yellow. I might cool it down a little bit. I can make it darker, bring out the highlights. If we look at the histogram, we can see that there's not a true white, so we could adjust the highlights and whites to move these values over to the right. So I'm going to drag this almost all the way up, and it's redistributing the values in our histogram. I can do a little bit with white, but I don't want the whites to go pure white. So I'm going to turn on my highlight clipping warning. And if you go like this and it turns red, that means that you may have gone too far. Those areas will be pure white. And you can tell that by looking at your histogram that this peak goes right up and that's pure white. So let's bring that down a little bit. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Now if I go to this side and I want to adjust my shadows, I'm going to deepen them up a little bit and maybe increase the black values. That looks good. Add a little bit of clarity. I think the contrast looks good. Hit the P to before and after. See, it's a lot better exposed, and I've been able to work with my histogram. If you want some contrast, go to the next tab over, and you can play with some of the presets, or you can go in and affect the curve itself. So now I need to do some retouching to this photograph because I have my lens hood right here, not the idea I was going for. So I can retouch in Camera Raw, which is really clumsy, where you draw like a circle. Okay, in this case it worked perfectly. So we're going to not do that though. Cancel. Clear all. Okay, so it might work perfectly, but we're going to pretend it doesn't. I'm going to open it up in Photoshop to do my retouching, but I want to make sure I can go back into Camera Raw if I want to. So if I open it as an image, how will it open? What will my layer look like? It won't be a smart object. It'll be a locked background layer. So let's give that a go. So then, if I was talking to a client and they said, oh, can you go in and do something to that file? I can't because it's a background. Now, if I shut that down, I'm going to hit Don't Save, go back over here, and you can see that the changes have been applied to it and it has the Death Star now. If I double click, and if I hold down the Shift, this open image changes to Open Object. Click on Open Object, and it's a smart object, which is super cool. Now, because I know how to retouch, I'm going to make a new blank layer at the top. name it Retouching. Get the spot healing brush. Oof, make a mess. Get the clone. Option click to sample. All right, take care of that business. So now I have that retouching done. If at any point I'm like, well, that's a little yellow, and it does look a little yellow on my screen, I can double click on this smart object, right? Smart object thumbnail, to go back into Camera Raw. I can make the adjustment I need to, if I want to increase the vibrance at this point, or if I maybe want a little less contrast, or a little more. Hit OK, and then it will update that file in Photoshop. So that's why if you are working with photographs, it's just much more efficient to go in, work in Camera Raw, and if you need to retouch or do anything like compositing where you need Photoshop, to open that layer as a smart object. There are certain things that you can't do on that layer, like you cannot retouch on that layer, so that's why I make additional layers, and sometimes I will copy this layer and have one layer that's rasterized and one layer that's a smart object, just in case. Okay. So I'm now, I'm sorry?
Why would you rasterize it?
How or why?
Why? What is rasterize?
I'm trying to think. Sometimes I need to rasterize it if I need to apply something to it, basically to retouch it. If I didn't want to do the retouching this way, or if I needed this to be a non-smart object layer, with it selected, I could use this pull down menu and let's see, right click maybe, control click. Oh, you gotta go all the way up to layer, rasterize, smart object. And then it goes to being all pixels. I can't think of when I would do that now that you ask me. Nope, can't think of it. So I would normally leave it as a smart object because you can resize it, you can go back into Camera Raw. There have been instances where I need to do certain things, and that's how you rasterize it though. Go to Layer, Rasterize, and it will say Smart Object. All right, question?
Say if you go to Camera Raw to Photoshop, but forgot to convert it to a smart object, can you just do it in Photoshop, or would it not be the same?
I don't think it will be the same. If I am here now, okay, let's go back. Let's cancel that. And I open this, and I hit Open Image. You can convert that to a smart object, convert to smart object, but it will not go into, it won't go into Camera Raw. It will go into Layer 0 PSB, which is the actual smart object. So if I do something to that smart object and then shut it down, and the smart object opens as a .psb, in another tab, once I save that, it will update my smart object. You can see I converted the layer and then it updated the smart object. So you can't go back into Camera Raw. Okay, so for the Harconi Gardens image, I'm going to have you open the PSD, File, Save As, last name, underscore EX5, and this can be, that's good enough. It's a PSD, hit Save, and then you can play around with retouching or anything that you want to do. I think I gave you a file with all of these in it, so you could just use mine. But what I want you to do is change it from black and white to color. So I select the Smart Object layer, double click. I could probably adjust those a little bit. Go to the Hue, Saturation, and Lightness, and click off on the Convert to Grayscale. And then play around with the hue, changing the actual color of the green, the saturation, making it lighter or darker with the luminance. And you can do anything else that you want to it. If you're like, well, it's a little dark still, you can lighten it up, play with the clarity, play with the vibrance, with the overall saturation. And then when you're done, hit OK, and it will update the smart object. and then just shut the object and save. And you'll see the thumbnail changes. Oh, did I not save? Go over here, bam. Okay, there you go. Save, save, and then the thumbnail will change. So this will be what you turn in for that file. Any questions? No? All right.